What are all of you doing in my living room? Did I invite you here? No, oh yeah. My secretary, she told me that you're going to have visitors today. I'm sorry. I apologize. I forgot. Yeah, well, welcome. Very often we have people come. They are tourists or they are students. They wish to meet with me and to hear a little bit about my life. And so, yeah. So, well, you know, typically we will have some questions and answers a little bit later. I will ask the questions and you will prepare with the answers. Yeah? Yeah, so well, allow me to, oh yeah, I was up in my study, which is on the second floor, and I discovered, perhaps you have seen this before, the little yo-yo. Yeah, well, I was giving mathematical lessons to a little girl in the neighborhood, and in return she gave me a little present, the yo-yo. So I am trying to master the physics of the yo-yo, and now I will demonstrate for you my prowess. You do not have to applaud, but if you wish to, go right ahead. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. Now this is the latest trick that I am working with, and I hope the string does not break when I do this. Yeah. Yeah, well, I will show you too. Yeah. So, well, before we get started, do you have any questions you want to ask me? No? Yeah. But people are often surprised when they discover that I was once a little boy, a baby. Yeah, it is true. And when I was first born, my grandmother said, "Oh my God, he is such a fat little boy." And well, my head was shapen in a certain way that my mother was worried that I would be slow when I got a little older. And when we had a housekeeper, and I am told that she called me a little dummy because I was slow to talk, not because I was slow up here, but because I was trying to, I would say the words to myself very carefully. And when I had them perfectly lined up like little toy soldiers, and I would whisper them to myself, then I would speak out loud. So it took me several years before I was ready to commit to speech like that. Maybe I was 3 or 4 years old. And as a matter of fact, I did very well in school. I was a very good student, except in the subjects that I was not interested in. Most of the subjects I was not interested in. I was mostly interested in the science and the mathematics, yeah. And that is what I did very well in. Yeah, so I wish to tell you that my life changed in 1920 when I made the final proofs of my theory of general relativity. And it was this particular work that it brought me to the attention of the world community of scientists and ordinary people as well. Would you like to hear a little bit about this theory? Yes. You are sure?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, perhaps you would wish to explain it to me first. Perhaps there are physicists here who can do a better job to explain this theory. You know, I had 1905 when I was 26 years old, and I was living with my wife Mileva, and we had our firstborn child, Hans Albert. And at that time we was living in Bern. And I was working 8 hours a day as a patent clerk in the office, yeah. And I would have 6 days a week to work. And when the supervisor was not paying any attention, I would stand at my desk and open my drawer and take out little bits of paper and work on my own theories. And when he would walk by again, I would carefully shut the door. So he never knew. And that is how I eventually was able to publish 5 very important papers. And one of them, it was on the theory of special relativity, which it was about space and time, and the fact that there is no absolute space or no absolute time, and all distances and measurements of time and distance, they are relative. Yeah, it depends upon where you are and how fast you are going. Yeah, very simple. Maybe you think that an inch is always an inch, and 1 minute is always 1 minute, no matter where you are. You can be on the planet Jupiter, and if you look at your watch and you time 1 minute, it will be the same as when you turn on your watch and you time for 1 minute. But I discover that is not true. No. Intervals of time and space, they are variable. They depend upon where you are and how fast you are going. And I arrived at this theory by considering motion in one direction, uniform motion, that is something that is traveling on a straight line. And the motion does not vary, it is uniform, yeah? But no, there are all kinds of motion. Did you ever blow up a balloon and then release it? What happens to the balloon? It goes every which way. So I wanted to expand my theory to incorporate all kinds of motion. I wanted to also include gravity in my theory, which was not in the special relativity. So, what is gravity? Yeah. Newton, of course, you know Isaac Newton, the great British scientist from the 1600s. He said that gravity is a mysterious attraction between one body and another, like between the Earth and the Moon, between the Earth and the Sun. That is gravity. But he did not know what is this mysterious attractive force. He said, well, it is responsible for when the apple on the tree falls to the ground. That is gravity, you see. But what is it? He didn't know. That was what I was trying to understand. And then I began my studies, yeah, and it took me about 10 years to finally resolve the complications of the work. So here is the problem. What is gravity? You know the speed of light. It is fixed. But I know somebody here must know what the speed of light is. 186,000 miles in 1 second. Yeah. So in 1 second, you could go around the Earth 7.5 times. Yeah, that's pretty fast. The speed of light, it is fixed. Nothing can exceed the speed of light. It is absolute limit. So now let's go back to Isaac Newton. If there is a mysterious attraction between here is the Moon and here is the Earth, it must happen instantaneously, this attraction, for Newton to be correct. But is that possible? If the speed of light is a limitation, nothing can exceed it, therefore nothing can be instantaneous. So Newton was wrong. It is not this mysterious attraction. That is not what gravity is. So I am searching, trying to understand how can we include gravity in the theory of relativity. One day I am sitting at my desk in the patent office, yeah, and I don't know what I am doing. Maybe I am having a little something to eat. It is during the break, and all of a sudden, I don't know why, but I imagine in my head somebody, perhaps it was me, falling out of a building. Yeah, just falling down many, many stories to the ground. And in my mind's eye, I think to myself, he would not experience his own weight. He would just be in free fall. There would be no mysterious force that would pull him down to the ground. He would be in free fall. That was the first hint that I was on to expanding my theory of relativity. And later on, when I am having a wonderful time with my wife, Mileva, and the children, and also with my good friend Marie Curie, who was the discoverer of, I forget, does somebody know what was the radium, yeah. And so we was in the Alps, we was taking a nice day, and the sun was shining, the sky was blue, the snow was glistening. I could not pay any attention with that. All of a sudden, I grabbed the hold of Marie Curie's arms, and I said, Marie, what I must know is what happens to somebody in an elevator when the cable breaks. She said, well, Albert, you're crazy. Why don't you just stop thinking for a while and enjoy the wonderful scenery? Yeah. But I said, Marie, I must understand, if somebody like myself is in a closed box like the elevator, and the elevator, all of a sudden, somebody, or perhaps the mechanisms, they break, and the elevator is plunging down through the elevator shaft, what happens to that person?
Well, dead.
Eh? Yeah.
Not sure.
Not sure. Then, you know, I'm also going back to when I imagine somebody falling out of a building, that person would not feel his own weight. He would be in free fall. So he would be floating in the elevator. And the elevator would be in free fall too. So if that person is me, and I happen to have an apple in my pocket, yeah, but I don't think you can see it. But now I am falling inside the elevator, and I drop the apple. What happens to the apple? Does it go down to the floor of the elevator?
Yeah.
No. It is in free fall. It is floating just like Albert. Yeah. And if I take a coin from my pocket and I flip it, it will not fall. It will float down. Then I recall the great scientist Galileo Galilei, is the Italian scientist, yeah? He understood that all objects, they will accelerate at the same rate, no matter what is their size, what they are made of, how big they are, what is their mass. If you put them in a perfect vacuum, they will all fall at the same rate. A little feather and a cannonball. Drop them in a vacuum, they will land on the ground at the same time. So there is no mysterious force that is pulling them down. So something heavier it will go faster. That is what Aristotle said, but he was wrong. Yeah. Well, this is all going through my head. I recall saying this to somebody once. The woman said, well, Professor Einstein, if I am in that elevator with you, I will jump up at the last moment, and then I will be saved. I said to her, my dear, I'm sorry, but your feet will not be on the ground when you jump up. So how can you jump up? You will be in free fall. Then I went a little bit further. Now this is what I call a Gedanken experiment. It is a thought experiment. I did not need a laboratory for these things. I could be working at my desk and I am examining applications for patents, and another wonderful image came to my mind. Now I see myself in a closed box up in the sky, higher, away from the gravitational pull of the earth, yeah? Now, I am far from any kind of pulling on me, so I am in free fall. Everything inside this box is also in free fall. If I have an apple and I drop it, it will be floating inside the box with me. Can you picture this in your mind? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I took one step further. What if there was a rocket and you could light the rocket and it pushed up? This is the bottom of the closed box, and here comes the rocket, and it pushes on the bottom of the closed box. So it is pushing the elevator up at a certain speed. What will happen to Professor Einstein? He will be back on the floor of the box. And the apple will be on the floor too, you see. Well, does Einstein know that he is in a closed box that is accelerating through space? Or does he think perhaps he is in a gravitational field, like back on the earth? He doesn't know. He cannot tell the difference. So I took it one step further again. I said gravity and acceleration, they are two sides of the same coin. They are equivalent. You cannot tell the difference. You see? Are you with me? Yeah. This is what gravity and acceleration. So if you put a closed box on the earth, and well, let us see. then let us say there is a little hole in one side of the box, and I shine a beam of light through that hole, and will it hit the other side exactly at the same height? No. It will be a little bit, because it will bend, the light will curve a little bit. Similarly, if you are in space, you are jumping toward to sleep, perhaps you would like to go in the other room and lay down. No? You're okay? Yeah. So if the box is in space and you shine the light through a little pinhole and the box is accelerating upward, the beam of light will curve. You see? It will curve. Yeah. Now I am trying to understand even further the essence of gravity. And I said, well, if it's not a mysterious force, then perhaps it has something to do with the structure of space-time. You see, the theory of relativity, special relativity, my old professor, he put the two together, space-time, and he said we're living in one reality, space-time. And that at ordinary speeds, we don't experience this connection, but close to the speed of light, then you cannot tell the difference between space and time. They are one reality, yeah? So if that is the case, then I'm probing, I'm trying to understand how can we explain why the planets will go around the sun? Yeah, and why don't they go into the Earth itself? Why doesn't the Earth go into the sun? That is when I begin to study another kind of mathematics, the geometry of curved spaces, of curved objects. Yeah, can you see the Earth? Like a complete curved, round object. And if you try to make a straight line on the Earth, what happens to the straight line?
Curves.
It must curve. Yeah. See, that is what an orbit is. A planet only wants to go in a uniform direction, in a straight line, at a uniform speed. But in curved space-time, this is what a straight line looks like. Now, there are little jogs between one little patchwork. Imagine a patchwork, but better yet, imagine a straight, imagine like a flat sheet, a rubber sheet, yeah? Like space-time, there is no objects. And I take a heavy object like what? A bowling ball. And I put it in the middle of the flat rubber sheet. What happens to the sheet?
Bends.
Yeah, it creates an indentation, a depression, a well, yeah? And if I take a little marble and I roll it across the sheet, what will it do? It will go boop, down in the well. Because it is not traveling very fast, but you see the Earth is going very, very fast. I forget the speed of the Earth. And the reason it is going so fast, well, because it is going so fast, it will not plunge into the sun, it will continue like this in its orbit. Well, I concluded that all objects, they will determine how space-time will curve. And the curvature of space-time will tell objects how to move. Tell the planets how to move around the sun, for instance. Yeah. So if this is true, then what about light? Light is a form of electromagnetism. Light is energy, and energy is mass. E equals mc squared. They are the same. So what I am saying about objects must also apply to light. And I determined that there is one way to test this. We need a complete solar eclipse. Then we can take photographs of light from a distant star as it comes close to the sun. If you can imagine, the sun will create a great curvature of space-time. And as that beam of light comes close to the sun, what must it do? It must curve, it must bend. There was a solar eclipse in, it was 1914, but what happened in the world? the war, yeah, so we had to call off the expedition and wait until the war was over, 1919. Sir Arthur Eddington from England, he got permission to take 2 boats with the photographic equipment, one to Brazil, one to West Africa. They take the photographs, and it would take several months for them to analyze. I am still remaining in Berlin, and a student said to me, Professor Einstein, what if it turns out you was wrong? I said, well, I feel very sorry for God, because the theory is correct. Yeah. Well, so they measured, and it turns out that there was a meeting of scientists in London in 1990. Well, I have the words of the chairman. I was not there. This was in November of 1919. The chairman, he stood up and he said to the dignitaries who were there, let me see, I have kept the words here somewhere. Yeah. This is the most important result obtained in conjunction with the theory of gravity since Newton's day, and one of the highest achievements in human thought. Pretty good. Yeah. And so the next day, well, somehow the word got out in the newspapers all around the world. They were very excited with the headlines. Like the New York Times said, lights all askew in the heavens, Einstein's theory triumphs. Overnight, the relatively unknown 40-year-old shaggy-headed German Jewish physicist became a world celebrity, and science was transformed. Yeah, so I become a big shot. Yeah, I am no longer having to be a patent clerk, but by then, of course, I have accepted a position at the University of Berlin, and I have left my mother, what a slip. My wife, Mileva, she was my wife, she was from Serbia, and she stayed in Zurich with the boys, Albert and Edward. And she did not want to move to Berlin. But so one time when I am there teaching, working at the University of Berlin, she brought the boys to see me, and that is when she discovered that I am seeing my first cousin Elsa. And we are having a very serious romantic relationship. Well, naturally, Mileva is not very happy about this. She wants us to keep the family together for the sake of the children. So, well, I agree with her, and so I create a list of conditions that if she can abide with these conditions, then we will maintain a relationship, the family. We will live in Berlin. Do you want to know what the conditions were? We will not have the same opinion of me.
I was going to say, I let you know, I'd stop.
One condition was she must have my meals ready for me every day at the same time. She must keep my room, my bedroom, and my study absolutely clean. She must not mess with any of my papers. If I ask her to leave the room, she must go without any questions. She must not expect any kind of intimacy from me whatsoever. If I do not wish to accompany her in a social engagement, she must not complain. And she must not say anything bad about me to the boys. Well, do you think she accepts these conditions?
No.
Yeah, well, she did. That is how badly she wanted to maintain the relationship. So we tried to live together for 3 months in Berlin, and by the end she had enough. She took the boys, I took them all to the train station in Berlin, and I watched the boys get on the train with Mama. It was a very sad day for me. I did not know when I would see the boys again. I did not know if my neighbor would say bad things about me to the boys, and then the boys they would not love their papa. So they got on the train and they said goodbye, and I went back to the office, the university, continued my work. My paper got out. It was published, like I said, it was published in England, and that is what brought me great celebrity, this particular paper on general relativity. In 1920, now eventually it was Elsa and I divorced Mileva in 1919. And soon I married Elsa. She had two daughters, so they was my stepdaughters. There was grown women, Ilsa and Margot. And, they had their own lives. we could not continue to live together. It would not be appropriate. So we get married. And I received an invitation from Chaim Weizmann. He was the president of the World Zionist Association. He wanted me to accompany him on a tour of this country here to raise money for the Jerusalem University. I didn't want to go. I had work to do. I had Elsa to think of. So I said, no, I don't want to go. But then a colleague came to see me in the apartment and said, you know, these are your people. You must do something on behalf of your own people, Albert. So I changed my mind, and I made my first trip to this country, 1921, with Chaim Weizmann and my wife Elsa. It took about, I don't know how many weeks to cross the Atlantic. And we come here into New York, to the harbor there, yeah. I don't speak too much English. We have translators with us. And I remember that all the reporters, they came on board the boat, and there are cameras, they're all flashing in my face, and the reporters are asking, of course I know this because the translator is translating, they are saying, Professor Einstein, how far away is the moon? What is the speed of the Earth? I said, I don't know. You think I carry this information in my head? If you are interested, go to the library. Yeah. You will find the answers to your questions in the books. Well, that was the beginning of my notoriety. There was a motorcade that would take Chaim Weizmann, my wife, and I right through the streets of Manhattan. But there I am standing in this car without the roof, and on either side of the street there are cheering crowds. They are calling out my name, Einstein, Einstein, Einstein. And the little children, they are throwing flowers at the motorcade going by. What is this? This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. I am just a scientist, but yet they are treating me like I am God Almighty. And so we begin the tour, and we go to different universities. I lecture on my ideas, and we go around the country, and we succeed in raising up substantial amount of money for the university, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Yeah. Chaim, he is not happy. He wanted to raise more money, but the tour was over, so I returned. And you know, Germany, at that time, the war was over, but the Versailles Treaty, it was a great burden on the German people. It imposed so many restrictions, and it created a great deal of poverty and suffering on the people. And in the early years of the 1920, 21, 22, there was so much unemployment. And the value of the German dollar, it just fell to the floor. It was worth nothing. Perhaps you have seen photographs of people, they are carrying wheelbarrows with the dollars, the German dollars, to buy something, buy some fruit if there was any fruit. Often there wasn't enough food in the markets for people. They wanted to blame somebody for their suffering, so who did they blame? They blame the Jews. Of course, the Jews. We are trying to control the global economy and the German economy to our own advantage. We don't care about the suffering of the people. That is what they were thinking, and they were believing that. You know, I would give lectures during the 20s in Berlin, and very often there would be somebody wearing a brown shirt and a black armband, and he would hiss at me. There was one such young man, and I am explaining a theory of mine, and he jumped up, he said, I want to slit that Jew's throat. That was the temper of the times. Well, I knew that Elsa and I would be better off if we left Germany. On the other hand, I struggled with myself. Perhaps my notoriety, it would be beneficial to the people of Germany if I remained in my own country. It might be like pacifying people. So we kept the apartment, I kept my position at the university, but I also would accept tours around the world. I went to South America, I went to Japan for 6 weeks, I went to France, to other countries in Europe, and of course I went to America sometimes, yeah. But what I was trying to do was to re-establish in people's minds that Germany, it is not just war and aggression and militarism and ultranationalism. It is also the land of Schubert. It is a land of civilization and culture. So I am trying to be an ambassador of goodwill for the German people. And also I am trying to reconnect the cooperation, the spirit of cooperation between scientists in Germany and the rest of the world. These bridges, they were all cut from the war, that we could not communicate with our colleagues because of the conflict, But it was my obligation, my responsibility to try to reconnect with my colleagues in other countries, in other parts of the world. At the same time, to rebuild the bridges, to rebuild the image of Germany as a place of culture. But much to my surprise, when I am returning to Germany and I am reading the right-wing press, how do they describe me? A traitor. I am a traitor to these people, because I am opposed to the rearmament of Germany and I am a committed pacifist. They don't like that. And I am receiving death threats. They want to get rid of me. And so, I don't want to leave completely from Germany. I will continue here as long as I can. We have a little villa outside of Berlin in the town of Kappel. There is a lovely little lake, and for my 50th birthday, my friends, they come together, and for my present, they give me a boat. Yeah, and I call the Boat Tumbler, which old German word for dolphin. And I love nothing better. We will go there on the weekends in the summertime, and Elsa will stay in the house, little house, and I will take the boat out, and I am sailing it. I don't wear a life preserver. I don't know how to swim, but I refuse to wear a life preserver. What I most enjoy, well, there are two things that I most enjoy. One of them is when I see somebody else on the lake, I will aim the boat for that person. And I will scare them. And then at the last moment, I will twist the sail so we move away. It is great fun. And also, perhaps you may find this very difficult to imagine, but there are a good many ladies who find me very attractive. And the rumor around Kappel is that Einstein is taking young ladies on his boat to have affairs with them. It is true. And I know that Elsa, she does not approve of these things. Nevertheless, it is a great problem between us. But I carry on the best I can. We have a difficulty communicating with the outside world when we are in Kappel because we don't have a telephone. So we have a neighbor, he is a potter. And it was a time when he would he had the phone. When he get a call for one of us, he would come running down the hill and say, the call is for you, Professor, or for you, Elsa. And so we had to change that system. Elsa got a little toy trumpet and taught the potter 3 different notes, 3 different melodies. So we would know if he played one particular melody, we know the phone call is for me. Another melody, it is for my wife Elsa, or perhaps it is for Miss Ducasse, our housekeeper, and my personal secretary. That worked very nicely. Yeah. So I returned to America in 1930, and I should tell you that, as I told you before, I am a committed pacifist, and I am supporting all organizations that are opposed to war of any kind, and of course there's not been much favoritism among the right wing in Germany, and I am supporting any conscientious objector anywhere in the world. I start a certain fund for these people. I know they need money for the lawyer, they need money to live, so if whatever I can, I will provide for them. This is part of, in the beginning of the First World War, 100 German scientists, scholars, artists, they signed a manifesto to the civilized world in support of the war, the First World War. Can you believe that? So, I got together with two of my colleagues and we wrote our own manifesto to the Europeans, opposed to German aggression. Did not win me any friends whatsoever. Yeah, so 1930, I am in. We go to America. Well, yeah, we go to America, and I am in New York City. I'm giving a lecture, and I am talking to people that I tell them that Germany is trying to rearm itself, and you know the Nazis, they are becoming very powerful. At first, I didn't think they would amount to anything. But they are opposed to the Weimar Republic. They want to overturn the government. And it is very, very difficult for the Jewish people especially. So I'm talking to the crowd and I'm saying to them, if only 2% of the young men in any country refuse military conscription, it will put a big sand grain in the war machine. Because they cannot possibly arrest so many people. Well, the people, they applauded. I said, if you're living in a place where there is conscription, then I will tell you, you must ask to serve in an alternative way. If you are in a country where there is no forced military conscription, then you must do everything that you can to prevent war. Yeah, so, and again, I said 2%, only 2%. The very next day, I see on the streets of New York young men, they are wearing little badges on their lapels that said 2%. So I knew I had made an impression upon them. So they returned to Europe, to Germany, and it is getting very, very possessed. There is a whole movement against me personally. I do not comprehend why they are signing the signals pointing their hatred at me. One of the journalists, he is what you call them, ultra-right journalist, Paul Whelan. He is organizing a series of lectures. And the purpose of the lectures is to bring the wrath of the German people against me personally. Yeah? I went to one with Elsa, with my stepdaughter Margot, and my secretary Helen Ducasse. We went to the Berlin Philharmonic halls. It was filled with people, and as you come in, there was tables with Nazi literature on them. I was appalled. And then I went in and I listened to this journalist, Paul Whelan, go on and on about what a worthless person I am, about Jewish science, Jewish physics, and how they have no purpose. The German Jewish physicists and scientists, they are incapable of rational thought. They are bringing nothing but calumny to the good German people. Well, I could not stand that, so I left. Elsa and I left, and then another time when I knew it was becoming very dangerous was when the people like Paul Whelan, they were getting together with important scientists like Philip Limit. He was a prize-winning, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and he wanted to debate me. He wanted to prove that my theories of relativity were wrong, and that all of Jewish science was wrong. So we went to another hall outside of Berlin. Elsa, again, she was with me. And well, I wasn't personally involved in the debate, but I listened to these two scientists, and it was just shocking. Elsa almost had a nervous breakdown when she was listening to this. We had to leave the hall. I had to sit down outside to catch my breath. And then I realized that our position in Germany was very precarious, and it wasn't soon thereafter that a good friend of mine, Marie Valentine, she was a journalist for some paper in Great Britain. She came to me, to my apartment in Berlin, and she said, I have been speaking with the commander of the German armed forces, Albert, and he told me to tell all my Jewish friends they are no longer safe here. And you in particular, you must leave Germany. Your life is in danger. I was getting letters. Some of them had a bullet wrapped up. And in the 30s, it was in 1932, the Nazi party, the World Socialist, the German Workers' Party, it got 38% of the vote. In 1933, it got 48% of the vote. So it was rising. But before that, when I pick up the paper, in the right-wing papers, I see cartoons. One of them, it had a noose around my neck. And the caption was, "Not yet hung." Another cartoon in the same paper, it showed a big leg and a big boot, and there is Professor Einstein being kicked down the stairs. This was the tempo of the times. Well, where am I going to go? I have offers from the university in Princeton and also from Oxford, Cambridge University, but what would be the perfect place for Elsa and I to make a new life? I return to America by way of San Diego, and once again, when we get there, this was later, same year, 1930. Once again, there are all these people. They are waiting for us. The children want to give us the little hearts. We love you, Professor Einstein. Yeah. And I spent 2 months in California, and that is where I meet Charlie Chaplin. And Charlie said to me one day, we go to the opening of one of his movies. He said, nobody understands me, nobody understands you, and yet they love you. Everybody understands me, and they love me too. Yeah. And they wanted me to be in pictures, motion pictures. And people are always taking my photographs, they want to paint my picture. And so one day a journalist said to me, "Professor Einstein, what is your occupation?" I said, "I am a fashion model." Elsa began to charge people a little fee to take my photograph. And she would put the money for the charity. I forget which one she was sending it to. I did not believe that the universe was expanding. I said it was static. And then I meet Professor Hubble, and he took me up to see the telescope. And I'm looking and there was no question about it. The universe is expanding. I was wrong. It was one of the mistakes in my life. That we make a long tour across the United States. Maybe you have seen the photograph. When I am I think I am in Nevada or Utah, and I am greeting the people of the Navajo Nation. And he as the chief of the Navajo Nation, he greets me as the great relative. And I have my photograph taken with the bonnet on, although I don't think that people there, they did not wear those kind of bonnets. I don't know why he insisted that I put it on. And then we return to New York City and take the boat. But when we are about to go back to Germany, I go to the German consul. And I am told by the consul there that stormtroopers in Germany, they have broken into my office in the University of Berlin, in my home, in my apartment, and also in the Carpeth, my little villa in Carpeth. And I said, "What are they doing there? What are they looking for?" The consul said they think that you are a communist and that you are storing ammunition and weapons, and they are looking for them. Your life is not safe if you go back there. Well, that is when we decide, instead of going to Germany, we go to Belgium, and we spend all of the summer in Belgium, where I am trying to decide where to go. I told you, I get the offers from different universities. We have armed guards; they are protecting us. We're staying on the Belgian coast. Now, by this time, of course, it is very dangerous in Germany, and Germany has rearmed itself. And it has invaded Belgium. And I write a letter, and even I give public interviews, and I say, if I was a Belgian citizen, I would not hesitate to join the army and fight. Well, this is appalling to my fellow pacifists. How can you say this, Einstein? We thought you was with us. And of course, this is just fuel to the fire in Germany, that I am calling for people to fight against the Germans. Well, to my mind, that was the only course of action against such a force as this German army. And the threat, it was a threat to the whole world. I said, if we allow them to triumph, that will be the end of personal freedom. But I was still a pacifist, not an absolute pacifist, but I don't know what is the term, a committed pacifist. But for this particular situation, I had to support the use of military force against the Germans, my own people. Of course, I had given up my German citizenship. I was a Swiss citizen by choice. Yeah. So we have the guards, and I decided that finally, at the end, in September, I decided I will accept an offer in Princeton. But before we return here, I go to England to lecture at, I forget, Oxford or, I don't remember, one of them. And we are warned, do not go there, Albert. Your life will be in danger. They will try to assassinate you or they will kidnap you. I don't care. I went anyway. I talked. And I told the people we must do everything in our power to prevent the Germans from their aggression. And then we come here. In October, we come here, and eventually we buy this little house on Mercer Street, and I begin a new life, a new chapter in my life. And I have not traveled abroad since then. We come here in 1933. 3 years later, my wife Elsa passed away. And now my sister Maya, she is living with us. She is sleeping now. She comes downstairs. She has a very weak heart. Yeah. And I am working at the university in the Institute of Advanced Studies. And what is my goal? I want to create one theory that will embrace everything, that will explain the entire cosmos, from the very large to the very subatomic. And my colleagues think that I am wasting my time. It is not possible, Albert, they are saying. You cannot, and because I do not believe in what I call spooky action from a distance, where one little subatomic particle and the other subatomic particle can communicate with each other, even though they are separated by vast distances. I said, this is not possible. But that is not my only concern. Every morning before I resume my work, I read the New York Times. I read what interests me the most, and I discover that racism is a blot on this country. I cannot believe some of the stories that I am reading about. You know, when the war was over, the Second World War, and the young men were returning to this country in the summer of 1945, veterans. That was a terrible summer for black veterans. Yeah, over 50 veterans, black veterans, they was lynched by lynch mobs in the South, not just in the South, but in other parts of the country as well. Well, I read about one of them, and that, you know, I should tell you, first of all, at first when I come here to Princeton, I thought it was an idyllic community. But then when I begin to walk around, I see with my eyes that it is not so idyllic. There is a black section and there is a white section. When you go to the movie theater, the blacks sit over here and the whites sit over there. If there was a swimming pool, you cannot use it if you are black. Yeah. And on the campus itself, there is a quota. They can only employ a certain number of Jewish scientists. I am one of them. I don't think there was another one. If there was, he didn't last. Yeah, he was an economics professor and he was soon fired. There was no black students in Princeton, none whatsoever. Why? Can you tell me why? I will tell you why. I went to speak to the headmaster. I said, why don't you have any black students here? He said, well, you know, the moral thing to do, professor, would be to have black students here. But you know, many of the students, they come from the South. And if they was to come here and see Negroes here, well, then I think that they would no longer be inclined to support our institution. Yeah. Well, you know what I call that. That is BS, the vernacular. Well, anyways, I read this one article. It happened in Columbia, Tennessee. In the summer of 45 or 46, there was a white repairman walking down the street when he passed a young soldier had just returned from overseas, a Negro walking with his mother. He was only 18 years old. The white repairman pushed the woman into a plate glass window for no reason. He did not even know the woman. And so her son picked up this man and hit him hard, yeah. Well, the police came, they arrested the young man, they put him in jail. That night there was people on the streets. There was fear that they will break into the jail and try to lynch this young man. Well, the governor did not know what to do, and some white people, so policemen and others, they got their guns and they went into the black section of the Columbia, Tennessee. It was called the Mink Slide, yeah. Well, the Negro who lived there, they were waiting for this, and they began to fire back, and some people was killed and wounded. And that is when the governor called out the state troopers, and they came with submachine guns. They roped off this section of town and they burned every single business, Negro-owned business. And they arrested I don't know how many people, 25, 50 people, all Negroes. Most of them, they was let go, but 25 of them were put on trial. And it was an all-white jury, yeah? And the judge was white. There was multiple trials, and one of the defense attorneys was Thurgood Marshall. Perhaps you have heard his name. He was a young man, and he and his colleagues succeeded in getting all but one of the 25 released. And the other, that one, served only a couple of months in the jail, and then he too was released. Well, I could tell you many stories about this, but because I was filled with horror, for I thought that I must do something. I cannot just give all of my attention to my work at the university, so I joined committees to oppose racism in this country. I would receive invitations to speak at universities, and I knew that they wanted to give me honors, and I would have to wear the robe. I said no. But then, 1946, in the summer, I get an invitation from Lincoln University, the oldest black college in this country. So I accept, and I went. It was painful for me. I was getting terrible pains in my stomach. The doctor said I have what you call in the aorta artery, there is a swelling on the wall of the artery, and they said you have to have this removed because it could, and it will be the end for you, Professor. But I did not want the operation. I went to speak here, and I told the students, there was about 250 students, they was all black. I said to them, you know, it is my view that racism is a white man's disease, and we are responsible to end this disease and to bring about racial justice. And later on we talk about my theories. The next day there was not a single word in any of the papers about this. Oh yes, if I go to a university and I talk about science or what, then they will put something in the papers. But when I go to this school and I condemn racist attitudes in this country, not a word. Yeah, so when we are back in Princeton, a great performer, Marian Anderson, she was an opera singer, and she was a black woman. She came to Princeton, she gave a performance, and the papers they gave her wonderful reviews. It was a beautiful voice. She can sing anything from a spiritual to the great works of Toscanini, Verdi, yeah. When she went to get a room at the Nassau Inn in Princeton, they denied her a room because she was black. When I found this out, I went to her and I had to stay with me. Every time she came to Princeton to perform, she stayed with me. Now, you know, Elsa had passed away by then, so we become good friends. Another good friend of mine was Paul Robeson. He was blacklisted as a communist. He was a communist. He was also a brilliant man, an artist, a performer, an actor, a singer, and an activist, yeah? And black, of course, yeah. But he was prevented from leaving this country. They would not allow him to have a passport. He was being watched by the FBI. And if he wanted to go to a church to perform, the minister would have to prevent it, because he would hear from the parishioners and other people say, we can't have the communists come here. We don't want anything to do with him. But he and I, we become good friends. He wanted to start something he called the crusade to end lynching in America. He wanted me to come to Washington and to speak. There was going to be a great gathering of people on the anniversary of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And then we would go and meet with Truman, yeah? Well, I couldn't. I was in such pain that I had to refuse the invitation. So he came to see me later on. He came with a good friend of his, and Paul Robeson had to leave the room. I was in bed at the time, and I said to the young man who was accompanying Mr. Robeson, I said, you know, it is quite an honor to me to be in the presence of somebody so great as Mr. Robeson. And the young man said, well, it is also true that Mr. Robeson feels the same way about you. That was the last time that I saw him, and they never got what they did meet with Harry Truman, the president. But Truman said, you know, I know you want me to pass legislation that will ban lynching in this country, but now is not the time. We cannot do that. You know, I will lose the support of voters in the South, and I will not be able to push my own agenda, so we will have to wait. Well, there was an altercation between Mr. Robeson and the president, and that was the end of that crusade to end lynching in this country, and it continued through the summer of 45 and 46. It was an outrageous time. At the same time, you know, what was his name? He was a Senator McCarthy. He was going after people, accusing them of being communists, summoning them to an interrogation, an inquisition. And people said, Professor Einstein, if I am caught, what should I do? I said, don't go. And I quoted what I had learned from reading the works of Mahatma Gandhi, the principle of non-cooperation. Do not cooperate with these people. They have no right to bring you to an inquisition and ask you about your personal beliefs. That was my position, and I wrote about it. And I stand by it to this day. 1939, I was having a little vacation in Long Island. We had a little place to go to, and I was there with my secretary, Helen Ducasse, and also my stepdaughter, Margot. And I received a visit from a physicist by the name of Leo Szilard, Hungarian refugee, like myself. I am a refugee. I became citizen in 1940. Yeah, and so he told me, you know, Professor Einstein, well, he called me Albert. The Germans are importing uranium ore from Czechoslovakia. We think they have understood how to divide the atom, to split the atom with fission, to bombard uranium atoms with a beam of neutrons. If this is the case, they will be able to develop an extraordinarily powerful bomb. Now, the war is going on. So Szilard, he wrote a letter, and we said, well, what we must do is present this letter to Roosevelt. He was the new president, of course. So I signed my name on it. We sent it to Roosevelt, and eventually Roosevelt understood that something had to be done. We could not allow the Germans to develop this weapon. We sent him several letters. The last one we sent to Roosevelt, it landed on his desk on the same day that he died from a cerebral hemorrhage. And in the contents of the letter was, I said, please, President Roosevelt, do not use this weapon, but you must develop it. You must have it ready. Well, as you know, it was used. It was authorized. As the bombing took place in 1945, two bombs. The first one on Hiroshima, and then instantly, I think, was 143,000 people instantly killed. And then several days later on Nagasaki, another 73,000 people killed. I was horrified when I heard this news. I had been to Japan. I love the Japanese culture. I had spent 6 weeks there. So I became a member of the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists, and I spent most of my rest of my life doing what I could to prevent an arms race, to call for disarmament. And above all, I said the only way to end the lunacy of war is to have a supranational organization that will control the armies of the other states. These other states must surrender some of their sovereignty to this supranational organization, like the United Nations, which we must strengthened to give it the power it needs. Otherwise, the world will explode, and that will be the end of humanity. Yeah, so I give talks, I write articles in the New York Times to urge for the disarmament and to prevent these weapons from ever being used again. I have a correspondence with the Japanese philosopher, and I am a little defensive. I am afraid, he is condemning me because of my formula, my equation, energy is mass times as well. That was the basis of the birth of the atomic movement. The fact that energy and mass, a little bit of mass contains a huge amount of energy. One little raisin, if you could extract the energy in that little raisin, it would be enough energy for the city of New York. For, I don't know, for maybe 1 week, 3 days. Yeah, you see? Well, I wish to conclude by, perhaps I will read to you, I was invited to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City on the occasion of the anniversary of Nobel, who was the one that he was the one who started the whole Nobel Prize. Yeah, and I will read you a little bit. I went there. I was a guest speaker, and let us see if I can find this for you. And then we will have a little questions and answer. I will ask the questions, yeah, and you will provide the answers. Don't worry. I am a good grader, but I have to have a little glasses here. Let's see. Oh, I forget to pour my tea. The picture of our post, this is what I said during the speech at the anniversary of Nobel. The picture of our post-World War is not bright. So far as the physicists are concerned, we are no politicians, and it has never been our wish to meddle in politics. But we know a few things that the politicians do not know, and we feel the duty to speak up and remind those responsible that there is no escape into easy comforts. There is no distance ahead for proceeding little by little and delaying the necessary changes into an indefinite future. There is no time left for petty bargaining. The situation calls for a courageous effort for a radical change in our whole attitude, the entire political concept. May the spirit that prompted Albert Nobel to create his great institution, the spirit of trust and confidence and brotherhood among men, prevail in the minds of those upon whose decisions our destiny rests. Otherwise, human civilization will be doomed. So, thank you all for being here tonight with me. I would ordinarily serve you a little lemon pound cake, but I'm afraid that Miss Ducasse is not here to prepare that for you. So if you have any questions, now is the time to raise them to my attention. Yeah.
Did you ever resolve in your own mind what spooky action the distance was or is?
Yeah, well, maybe the people here, do they know what the spooky... We're not talking about your Halloween, when you're dressed with the funny things, yeah. No, the spooky action is at the subatomic level, when it is possible for one little subatomic particle in another to speak with each other, to communicate instantaneously, so that it is happening faster than the speed of light. And that is why they say, well, this violates your principle of relativity, Einstein. What are you going to do about that? But they don't understand. They don't understand that I believe throughout my life, well, in the latter part of my life, that there is a deeper reality. Deeper. We must go deeper. And there are rules, there are natural laws that we have not uncovered yet, that will explain what we now see as spooky action. It is, in fact, it is adherence to laws that we have yet to discover. You see? You wish to raise any other questions with me? Yeah.
What was your first wife's educational background?
She was brilliant. She wanted to be a physicist, Mileva. Yeah, she was from Serbia. She was 2-3 years older than me. My mother did not like her at all. And also, she was not Jewish. But she wanted to be a physicist. She was brilliant, and I could see from the first day of classes. But you know, she failed the final exams. Twice she took them. Both times she failed, and she was so disappointed. Her dream to become a physicist, it was over. And yet, when we are married, she was invaluable to me. I would share my thinking with her. I would share the mathematics. She would correct my own mathematics. Yeah, and to this day, I regret the fact that I did not give her the attribution that I should have. Yeah. But she had a good friend who was a professional chemist, a woman. And you know who her husband was? It was the man who invented poison gas. Haber. Yeah, and he wanted to be there on the battlefront to watch when they opened the canister and 5,000 British troops were killed by the poison gas. She was completely opposed to this. And he was having a celebration party in his home, and she was so upset she took his revolver, went into the garden and shot herself in the heart. Yeah.
What happened to your boys, your sons?
But that is an interesting story. You know, they blamed me for the divorce. They blamed me for the fact that the relationship did not work. But, you know, we patched things up eventually. And Hans Albert, he had to leave Germany too. He became a refugee, and he was very brilliant. He became an engineer, a scientist at the University of California in Berkeley, I think. And he got married, had children, and we would see each other from time to time. He would come to the house. We have a little villa in Kappelt, you know, I told you about that. So we had a good, strong relationship at the end. And I respect him greatly. He was a very successful scientist. Yeah? On the other hand, Edward, who was just as brilliant and perhaps more sensitive than Albert, we saw in the early years that he had signs of mental instability. And so he wanted to be a psychiatrist. He was enamored of the writings of Freud, but he spent most of his adult life in a sanatorium. Yeah. And once I come here to this country, I no longer saw him. Yeah. But I would see Albert, my firstborn son. We had a third child. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. When before Mileva returned to Serbia, I had just finished the final exams, and we had a romantic weekend in Lake Como, Italy, very romantic weekend. And later I learned that she was having a child, pregnant, yeah. She was now in Serbia telling me, she had a little girl, Liesel. I never saw Liesel, and we decided to give her up for adoption. And when she come back here, when Mileva come back here, and eventually we get married, and I think that was always on her mind. It always shadowed her life, and therefore it shadowed our lives, that we never had Liesel to be with us. And that she had the child before we are married, and it is not the same time as now. And she was afraid that if it was known, it would ruin my own career, never mind her career. And so she insisted that we get married, and we never tell anybody about this child. But I am telling you, it's all right. Yeah, anybody else?
Yeah. Did you ever have the operation on your aorta?
Well, in April of 1955, I had extreme pain in my abdomen, and they take me to the hospital. And I asked Helen Dukas, my secretary, to please bring my papers to the hospital because I was completing some work. And the doctor said, well, you know, we can still operate. I said, no, I have done my share. It is time to go. So that was the end. I don't want to hold you longer than you wish to be here. So, Otherwise, if you wish to throw comments to me, it's all right. Or ask questions. I'm happy to answer whatever you wish to. But no? Yeah.
Who is still your wife?
Well, Elsa and I, she was my first cousin, Elsa
Okay.
Lowenstein.
Okay.
And so we get married 1919, I think, 1920, I forget. And she was my second wife, and she was completely different from Mileva. Elsa took care of me like a little child. She would tell me what I had to wear when we go out to a social event, how I must behave, what kind of silverware I must use, what I should say, not say. At one time I could not properly button my shirt, and so she sewed it. And I was tight like this. And we are sitting down, and they give us a dessert, and I didn't know what spoon I should use. So only spoon I see was the one for the salt. It was just a little tiny spoon. I'm trying to eat the ice cream. She was very worried about my appearance, and I said, well, Elsa, if people are so concerned about how I look, well, have them come into the house and show them the clothes in the closet. I am the person. This is who they want to know about. I don't care about the clothes. You see, I don't like to wear socks either. One reason I did not get into the army, when I was I was 17 years old, they called me down for the medical examination, and they discovered that I have flat, sweaty feet. So they said, go away, we don't want you. Yeah.
That was handy.
That
was good.
So Elsa was my second wife,
Okay.
and she was an actress, so she knew how to entertain people. She was very jovial, very motherly, very down to earth. She had no pretensions about becoming a scientist like Mileva, and she was not depressed like Mileva. Well, she had sad moments. She had depression like all the people, but you know, with Mileva it was constant. It was one, yeah.
There's a picture of you I've seen before where you were sticking out your tongue. Could you tell do you remember that picture?
Yes, I was in the car. It was in New York City. I think I was with Charlie Chaplin. Yeah, and as a photograph, the photographer, they wanted to take a picture of us, and I'm in the back of the car, and I stick out my tongue. I will do it for you, but I'm sort of embarrassed now. You asked me to.
If Einstein were alive today, what would he be saying about the government's philosophy on climate change, the rise of white supremacy and immigration? What would he do today?
Well, I am standing in front of you. I'm here, flesh and blood. But I think I think that he would completely agree with, because he was I will speak in the first person. Because I am a scientist and I believe in the value of facts, I would see that the reality that climate change is a reality, that the facts supports this, and because I am concerned about the destiny of the human race, I would urge people to do everything they can to avert this catastrophe of what will happen to the earth. In fact, it may be too late, I don't know. Your other question was the rise of the ultra-right. Well, I experienced that myself in Germany. I know how dangerous these people are. I have seen for myself what they do to people who do not support their ideas. You know, in 1933, right after he became the chancellor, Hitler, then they burned down the Reichstag building. They blame it on the communists and the socialists. They begin to burn books, including my books. They torched the Jewish businesses. This is what the right wing is capable of, the extreme right wing. And I would fight tooth and nail to oppose them. And I would tell people, and I have told them myself, your first priority must be to the wider group. You must sacrifice your own personal comfort at times, not always, but there is times in everyone's life when there is something more important than your own personal safety and comfort. And now, if we are threatened by right-wing forces, we have seen what they are capable of doing, that we must oppose them. That's what he would say. That is what I would say if I was him.
What was your relationship, if any, to religion?
That is a very good question. The question is, what is the relationship with the religion? I will again answer in the first person. In the 1930s, I received a letter from a little girl. She was 11 years old. She was in America. And she wrote to me, she said, my Sunday school class, they are writing to scientists to ask them if they pray. So I respond to this little girl. I wrote her back a letter. I have the letter. I can read it to you. But I will paraphrase for you what I said to her. I said, well, you know, I do not believe in a personal God. I do not believe there is some embodiment that if we pray to, he will hear us and he will answer our questions in some way. Or he perhaps is a she, I don't know. But I personally do not believe there is such a thing. But I do believe, and therefore I don't accept the validity of many of what we are taught in the Bible. I said, all of my life, from the time I am a little boy, I am in awe of what we don't understand. I am in awe. I see this miraculous universe, and I am trying to divine the laws governing it. And my sense of awe, as I look at the mystery, that is the closest thing that I have to a religious feeling. And I hope never to lose that feeling. I believe there is an intelligence that is so far beyond us. We cannot communicate with this. It is a spirit. That is my conception of God. That is beyond our comprehension. It is so vast and so complex and so beautiful.
Supposedly, there is an Einstein quote that goes something like this: coincidence is one of the ways God remains anonymous.
That's a very good quote. You know, there are so many things that I am supposed to have said. Imagination is more important than knowledge is one of them. Yeah. Coincidence is
one of the ways God remains anonymous.
That's a wonderful word. I like that. I like that very much. This coincidence. Yeah. But it is the goal of the scientists to understand what are we calling coincidence. Is it truly coincidence, or is there something at work that we don't yet understand? That we can say, there is a cause and effect. This is the consequence of certain properties of the natural world. And yet we're calling it coincidence, or what is there is a big word, it begins with the S, serendipity. Yeah. Perhaps there is much more, as I would say, there is so much more we don't understand. And I will never tell you that the understanding is complete. Yeah.
Is your mind always working? I mean, do you sleep?
When I sleep, yeah, I sleep. Right? Yeah. When I have my first, when I finally finished the work on the theory of special relativity, Mileva and I got drunk. And we crawled under the table in the kitchen. Yeah. And yeah. But yeah, I sleep, but yeah, well, of course, but my mind is working, and my dreams are they're very complex, often very rich, and I draw upon the dreams to help me understand it. And of course, another way is when I am playing the violin, or the piano, or when I was out in the boat sailing, my mind would be relaxed, yeah. And that is often when I make discoveries. Things would come up that if I was working very hard and thinking, I would have difficulty. But when I'm free of that, then yeah.
Can you say more about your musical skills?
Well, my housekeeper, she said it was like listening to a chicken scratch. But you know, other people said that it's not too bad. Yeah, but I think that I was pretty good. My mother She insists I learn to play the violin. She played the piano. I learned to play the piano too, and I was able to accompany accomplished musicians. Of course, my preference is for certain composers, and particularly Mozart and Bach and Brahms. Beethoven, no. I don't understand Beethoven. But I love to play Mozart, and if you can say that, then you have to be pretty good. You may not like how it sounds, but I know the notes. Yeah. You have a question?
Yes. How did you learn to speak English, and was it a problem for you at some point?
Oh,
It was your second language?
yeah, English was very, I had to study French first in Germany, and I did not listen to the professor, and I didn't do my homework. So when I tried to get into the university, my score was very low in the French. But when I started to come to America, I had to learn English. It was difficult for me because it is very difficult. Yeah. But I had a teacher, and I taught myself. I used books. Yeah, I listened to the radio, and little by little I improved my English. But it is very limited English. It was not easy. Yeah. But if you can listen to, there are many times when I have been recorded on the television or on the radio, and I'm speaking in the English. Yeah, I think maybe, there are refreshments there if you wish to have some. I don't wish to hold you.